Great. So we appreciate having you join phase 2 of our webinar series. The series is hosted in collaboration with the Capacity Building Volunteers team. Today's session gives attention to crisis management with special focus on testing your strategy for an unanticipated crisis. For your information, this session is being live streamed via Facebook. You will be muted during the presentation. A link will be shared in the chat where you can share your questions, and there will be a moment after the presentation for your questions to be answered. To share with us this afternoon is Miss Mariama Johnson. She is the International Commissioner of the Sierra Leone Girl Guides Association, a holder of a master's degree in business administration, and she has experience working with international non-governmental organizations in the field of administration and human resources. Currently, she is a personnel and administration manager at the Medicine Sans Frontiers. On a personal front, Ms. Johnson enjoys music, dancing, sharing, working with young people, counseling, writing, involving in activities, and volunteerism. At this time, I will hand the floor over to Ms. Johnson.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to join colleagues so that we can look at crises, look at the uncertainties that we are faced with as an association, and we'll be able to chart the way forward as we move along. I want to say thank you to the executive members for opening up their doors so that I'm invited or selected, or whatever you will call it, to be able to share in this session. And please, if I am going too fast for the interpreters, please let me know. Sometimes I try to speak very fast, but I'm going to make every effort to try to go slowly. So can we start now, if it's okay? Our topic today is testing the strategy for unanticipated crises. We have the objectives that we have put together from what was shared with us, and we're going to look at the objectives, and we believe at the end of the day, we will be able to achieve our goal. The first one is we examine the impact of unexpected situation in a member organization. And also we gain a deeper understanding of the MO position as a result of unexpected external crisis situation. Then we determine immediate strategic initiative to adjustment to address our new reality. And then finally, begin to identify a long-term strategy in alignment with the movement strategy. So we have these objectives, which we believe we'll be able to meet at the end of the day. Can we move on to the next slide? Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. One thing that we should never forget is whatever we do it for the girls. I'm sure that's the passion that all of us have. That's why we do whatever we do for the girls. We're going to look at the progression of crisis recovery and evolution. Can we go back, please? We go back. Can we go back, please? Okay. In any crisis situation, we have the response, the recovery, and the strike. So those three are very important as we look at the next, yes, this one. Can we stay on this one for a moment? For the response, when we deal with the present situation, we need to consider how we're going to manage continuity. So in a crisis situation, just think about today. Think about today and tomorrow. So that's how you respond to it. And the next stage is the recovery stage. It's a period of learning. Whatever you go through in that crisis situation, you have to learn something out of it. And at the end, you'll be stronger. you have to come out being very strong. And the next slide, the next point is a period of preparing and shaping the future. So you prepare and you shape the future. What you will meet, how do you want the organization to go? How do you want it to move on? How would you want strategies to be put in place? You have to consider those three things. There are good strategies and there are bad strategies. For any crisis situation, you diagnose. The next slide, please. Okay, so in the diagnose phase, you need to explain the nature of the challenge. How is it like? This type of challenge that we are faced with, this type of situation, how are we going to look at this as an association? Look at what you will bring out of that challenging situation that you have. And then look at the policy that we have and see how those policies can fit into those challenges that we face, fit into those realities. It's very important that our guiding policies that we have can help us to overcome the obstacle and identify in the diagnosis that we have made. And then we put those policies into actions. So you have to take these policies that you have and put them into actions. The policies that you might have designed and put them into actions. These ones are very important for a good strategy. Can we continue with good strategy, please? Bad strategy? Next slide, please. Okay, the bad strategies are listed, and we want to be very careful as an association that we do not fit into those bad strategies. If we cannot define our challenges, we will not be able to improve from those challenges. We will not be able to stand against the challenges. So the first one is failure to face the challenges. We have to be strong to be able to face whatever challenges that we have. And a bad strategy can be the mistaken goals for strategy. So it's not what we desire, it's what we plan. How we plan to overcome these challenges that we have faced with, how we plan to overcome them according to how we might have. A bad strategic objective can also be a bad strategy. And also, any form of Buddhist masquerading as strategic concept can be a bad strategy. So these ones, we need to consider them as we look at a good strategy and a bad strategy. And also, let's not forget, forget that if you're doing a strategy, be realistic. Don't list things that you think are not realistic. Whatever you list down, whatever policies you put together, they have to be realistic. Can we move on to the next slide? Next slide, please. There are 5 key steps that we need to consider when we're moving from the response stage to the striving stage. And we're going to take some time to look at them and just discuss them so that we'll be able to be successful as we look at any crisis situation. The first one is gather the response and review the data. We prioritize, we plan, and we act. Can we move on so that we can explain them? Next slide. We gather the response team. Your response team can be your lead paid staff, your chief commissioner, the members of the board, or any other staff. You will not want to bring all of the membership of the association into a response team. The response team can be somebody that is a decision maker. so that it's a crisis situation and we don't have time to waste. So you need to bring somebody that can make a decision, and somebody that you don't need to bring somebody that will have to go back and revert to an authority for a decision. Somebody that can act quickly. So that's why we need to have senior position members in the response team. Next slide. When meeting with the response team, you have to be very mindful about your well-being and their well-being as well. It is a crisis situation. It's an uncertainty. It's a situation that we were not prepared for. So, and people have different makeup and different mannerism. People are characterized differently. The way they respond to situations are different. So you have to be mindful of your own personal well-being and the personal well-being of other members as well. We have to set a calm approach, a methodological approach, step by step, methods by methods, realistic approach. You know, there are things that we cannot negotiate when we look at those situations. There are things that we cannot say, well, we put them on hold or we compromise them, and that's our mission. We cannot compromise our missions. We cannot compromise the safety of the girls. We cannot compromise our promise to the girls. They are non-negotiables. They have, as they are, we have to act on them as they are. And then we build a communication of stakeholders. With the stakeholders, we have the internal and the external ones that we have to talk to. Internally, you have to build up that kind of communication, and the external people. Don't forget that we have people outside of the station that are also supporting their station, and they need to be informed. No, they need to be aware with what's happening in their station. So it's important that we build a communication as well. Next slide. Next slide, please. On step 2, we review the data. You know, we are not going to be like, what the data that we have got since the start of the period, we are going to continue with that data. No, we have to have an updated data collection strategy. We have to have an updated data. Don't forget that we are in a crisis situation and so many things might have changed. So it's not going to be business as usual. We have to make sure that the data that we have is as current as the crisis itself. And then we have an update our supporting data strategy. Whatever we can use, we need to support it as well. The next thing that we need to do under the review and the update of data, we focus on the changes that might have resulted in the crisis period. The girls. How many girls do we have now? How many we don't have? How many cannot access this facility? The people that support us, our volunteers, our paid staff, we need to review those data. Our support mechanism, the volunteers, our donors, our funders. You know, how many of them can still support the association financially? Our organizational structure, it's a crisis situation. All of those mediocrity that we need to go through, the step that we need to pass for a decision to be made, we need to review and update them because so many things might have changed. Don't forget that we have step 1 where we have to build the response team. If we're going to build that response team, automatically we're going to move away from the normal organizational structure. And so we have to update and review that as well. And then the external environment. There are many things that might have, you know, happening around we. They need to be reviewed. They need to be updated. Next slide. Next slide. Also, we have membership that need to be updated and need to be reviewed. How many groups, how many companies, how many packs, how many troops that we have that are currently existing under this crisis period? The levels, how many of them are in this level? They need to be reviewed and updated. If not, we will not be able to serve them effectively. If you don't have an updated data, you don't have an updated record, the services that you will have to provide will either be in excess or will not be enough for all of the people that you have to provide for them. What are the alternative programs that we can provide for the membership that we have currently? They need to be reviewed. The percentage of girls that will need financial support during this crisis period, if you don't have an updated records of the girls, you don't have an updated records of the current membership, how will you be able to support them? You cannot. So you have to have them updated, and then we'll be able to release financial support to them. The overall adult membership, how many of them are still available during this crisis period? How many of them can offer their services during this crisis period? How are we going to link them with the girls that we have, with the membership that we have? So all of this need to be updated. Next slide. Next slide. For volunteer support, how many volunteers we still have? You know, how many active alumni we still have? The existing volunteer support, how many of them? Troop leaders, group leaders. You need to access them, be able to access them, be able to contact them, be able to be in touch with them. We have the levels, and each leader will be able to contact the MO at the top, should be able to link up with all of those leaders so that they have to get connection with the troop leaders, the troop members, the volunteers. Everybody have to have an assignment and a design role. A design role to do what we have to do. So it's very important that we check those records and need them updated and reviewed regularly. Next slide. Next slide. For program delivery, if we don't have an accurate records, we will not be able to deliver the number of programs that we need to deliver. You know, the number of programs offered by levels, by type, what type, how many people we can reach virtually, how many people we can reach, you know, what type of events we'll be able to organize during this period, what activities we cannot organize during this period, what activities we can put on hold during this period, the number of programs that we need to cancel because of the crisis situation. So it's very important that we need to consider them. You know, all our activities, we need to have them updated and recorded. You know, whatever you can offer, there is this thing that we were a bit, I will not say surprised, but we were like, you know, left in awe when we see how internet is being used to provide guiding in the MOs. Where lots of MOs were able to use the virtual to be able to reach out to the girls. And so it's very important that all of these things are up to date, and then we'll be able to serve the girls as we are supposed to serve them. Next slide. Our brand, our visibility. Even if it's a crisis period, we still need to touch the community. Our existing outreach program, we still to reach out, you know, like some MOs during the COVID period, they were able to reach out to the community. They were able to sensitize, they were able to bring out some relief items to the community. So our visibility is still important, even in a crisis period. The media outlets, how are they going to touch the community? It's still important. How are we using the social media facilities that are available, WhatsApp, you know, Facebook? How are they being used in the crisis period? They're still very important. Some of them are extremely important that we cannot do with them during crisis. And especially for this crisis that we face with, the social media They were like the exceptionally used forum for every MO. And so our brand, our visibility, they are very much important because they make us known to the external stakeholders. They make us known to the external world. And then during crisis, our essence, our relevance is felt. Next slide. During crisis, our financial resources are affected. Income, our program fees, the sales that we need to do. Some MOs do sell items. They have product sales. They rent their facilities. They have been affected. How many rentals do we have? Do we have as usual? No. Are they reduced or are there increases? Our reserve funds, they're very important. Our fixed cost as well, the personnel cost. How many staff? Can we still continue with the staff that we have? It is very important. We need to make those decisions. That's why the response team needs to make very strong decisions to be able to help the MO to progress. The insurance premium, the facilities that we have, how are we going to manage with them for the continuity? How are we going to manage with them for the future? So they're very important. Is this because of crisis that we're going to put away the personnel, the staff that we have? How are we going to cope with them during the crisis? And then they'll be able to serve effectively. Next slide. So we need to ask the number of an amount of designated operating gifts. How many of them are available? The capital gifts, the planned gifts. How many of them are donors? Who are our top donors? Those people that can support us greatly in and out of crisis. The ones that were supporting us, how many of them can still support us? We don't want to remove ourselves from the books of the donors. We want to keep the donors supporting us. So whatever we do, that's why we need to contact the stakeholders, the external stakeholders, and one of them is our donors. They need to be able to know what's happening in the MO. Because we want for them to keep us in their books. We want for them to keep us being supported. We need their funds. And we also need to touch other donors with what we're doing during the crisis period, so that we'll be able to acquire more funding, even in the crisis period, to be able to support the work that we do with the girls. Next slide. Our staffing, as we look at the structure in the crisis period. How many part-time staff? Will they be able to become full-time staff because we're in the crisis period? Or will the full-time staff be able to become part-time staff because we're in the crisis period? Those questions need to be answered by the response team. Our governance documents, the dates last visited, when were they revised? They have to be up to date. They have to be reviewed and revised regularly, so that when we're in the crisis period, we can manage the situation as we are faced with them. Any new law or restrictions to our work when we're in the crisis period? Yes, like this one, we were restricted from face-to-face meetings to virtual meetings. So the response team have a great role to play as we go into a crisis period. Next slide. Next slide. For the schools that we work with, some MOs deal with schools, some MOs deal with schools and communities. We need to have the number that is open, the numbers that are going virtual, the numbers that are still existing, the number of schools that we think they cannot cope during this period. We need to have them clearly stated. Our group meeting sites, the number that are available, those that are open, we have to have them, clearly, our safety nets, our existing social support structures, our safety nets, the representative in the community resources. Those are people that we need to contact. Those are resources that we need to use even in this crisis period. So it is very important that we look at those structures whilst we're talking about the external environment. We deal with the people, we deal with the girls. Every MO deal with the girls, and so we need to make them comfortable. And part of how we're going to make them comfortable, we need to look at the things that will make them safe, the things that will make them be able to continue being involved in the organization's activity, the things that will be able to make them comfortable. Next slide. So when we are going to look at the review, the update of the record, we need to consider review our current data and then update. Our current challenges, they should be documented, they should be noted. Our updated data, they need to be noted, our action plan. So we're going to look at them step by step as we continue with the discussion. Under the review, we have what we, can we go back? Can we go back, please? Okay. The first one is the current challenge, and then the updated data, the plan of action, the resources needed to do what we have to do, and the responsible person. There are people that are responsible for every thing or every assignment or every activity. You have to have a responsible person. If you're having a response team, you have to have a responsible person that will communicate to the stakeholders, that will communicate to the girls, that will communicate to the parties that are involved. The plan of action. What type of action do we want to take during this period? Do we need to adjust any dates? Our targeted dates. I'm sure you agree with me that some programs were canceled, some activities were rescheduled. So these are very important. Next slide. Next slide. Step 3 is prioritize challenges and responses. Prioritize challenges and responses. So we look at whatever opportunities that are available for us as guys, as MOs. I'm sure in every crisis, there are opportunities that we need to take advantage of. The opportunities that will make us relevant, the opportunities that will make us be able to showcase ourselves. We need to capture those opportunities and include them in our activities so that we do not become obsolete even in the crisis period. We'll be able to detect the threats that are available. Every threat that are available, we should be able to detect that and say, these are the threats, and if we venture into these threats, we will fail to some extent. We will not be able to achieve our goal, so they should be detected. The next thing we need to do, evaluate your current plan in terms of feasibility, during and after. The plan that we have, we are going to look at contingency plans. So the strategic plan that we have now, will we be able to use it? Can we use it now? No. Can we use it after? Maybe to some extent. So we have to evaluate it and see how far we can go with that plan. You know, are there elements in our plan that we think they are no longer feasible? Yes, because we are in a crisis period. Those plans, you need to look at them and you have to readjust and change, do some changing. So that's why the response team is very, very important. They will have the bulk of the assignments when it comes to a crisis period. If you can do anything about these plans, then we have to move on. But I'm sure we'll be able to do something about some of the plans that we already have. And if there are some that we cannot do anything, then we have to move on. We move on. We move it to another period, to another time. Because in our strategic plan, we must have some flexible activities, and we have some activities that are not flexible. So we need to look at that. And there are some factors that make our plans and our components no longer flexible in a crisis period. Some factors have positive impact on them. Like in the COVID, we as an association, as MO, you have to do an activity in the community, do an activity in your area, in the country, and then you make yourself relevant. You make yourself very important during the crisis period. You engage the girls in virtual meeting, you engage the girls. So if we are like having a strategy for face-to-face meeting, we now have to design a strategy for virtual meeting and see how we can safeguard our girls even in the virtual meeting. So we need to see all of those as we look at how we look at the challenges and the responses. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. It's our planning options for recovery. That is our fourth step. So we have the data and the answers. Where are we now? In this present situation, where are we now? We need to look at where we want to be in the future. In 1 month's time, where we want to be. In 3 months' time, where we want to be. In 6 months' time, where we want to be. In the next year, where we want to be. What strategy can we use to get where we want to be? So we have to redesign some of our strategies, because then they will help us to get where we want to be. Some of our strategies, if we're going to implement them, then we cannot be able to predict some of the scenarios that we'll be faced with. We cannot be able to be successful in some of the scenarios that we will be faced with. Next slide. And so, as we look at our crisis recovery for evolution, these are the steps that we have to follow in the response, in the recovery, and as we strive for the future. So in our response, we have to deal with the present circumstances that we are faced with right now. And we have to know that when we deal with them, we need to move on. In the recovery, help us to be strong. And everything that we pass through in the recovery period is a learning period for us as MO. So as MO, you have to go understand that it's a learning time and it helps you to be stronger. And then you will be like a support for a next crisis. You'll be like a support because you have learned from it. And then we prepare for a striving period, a period that we have to prepare for the future. So these are the evolution that we go through when we are in the crisis period. Because we all have different mannerism and different makeup, it takes a very strong person to be in charge of specific assignments and specific activities when it comes to crisis period. You have to have somebody that have a strong makeup, that can make a fast decision, that can make a good decision. So as we move from one step to the other, the response, the recovery, and the striving period, while we have to look at the future, all of them are very important. Next slide. And then the last step in is the act and promptly and communicate. Act and communicate. Act promptly and communicate. Our communication should be prompt, they should be effective, they should be consistent. If they are not effective, you will not be able to pass on a clear message. Clear communication is very important. Prompt action, when you take it, you communicate clearly. Make your communication very clear so that everybody in the MO, all stakeholders in and out of the MO can understand. It has to be effective. It has to be consistent. It has to be regular so that people will not assume and presume that this is what is happening. You know, people have to be au fait with every communication that is passing on within the association. Then we update our plan and our communication as needed. Regularly, the plan needs to be updated. Regularly, they need to be updated. And provide opportunity for question. It's a two-way communication. If you communicate, you need to get feedback. You need to get responses. You need to hear how people feel about any particular situation. So when you communicate, you have to give opportunity to those that you communicate through to respond or to bring out feedback, to express themselves. So it's always two-way. And our communication should have two purposes: to inform our stakeholders and to thank them. We have to inform them with the activities of the MO. You inform every stakeholder so that they are aware of what's going on in the MO. They will not think that the MO has lied dormant because of a crisis situation. But if you inform them promptly, you inform them effectively, you inform them clearly, then they will have an understanding of the activities and the stance the MO is taking during this period. And also we need to thank our stakeholders, every one of them, the members, the volunteers, the adult leaders, our funders, our donors, our supporters. We need to thank them because they have stood by us during the crisis times. Next slide. We're going to look at communication in crisis. And the first point is to understand the required mindset shifts for all types of members in the MO. In a crisis period, it is not business as usual. There's been a shift in the mindsets of people. So we need to understand that. We are going to discuss that, as we go to the next slide, the preceding slides that are coming, but I'll just go through quickly. And then the second point is identify and consider the uncertainties presented and the implications. And then we develop trust among members. They help, when members have trust in the MO, it helps the recovery period. And then the fourth one is clearly define the destination and the direction and launch the recovery roadmap. And then we learn from others' success. We learn from the success stories from MOs. So we're going to look at the first point, which is the mindset shift. The next slide. Here we have from the response to the recovery. We have a situation that is unpredictable. And presently we are in the interim normal situation. Some people say crisis world has 3 days in the week. It has the yesterday, it has the today, and the tomorrow. Therefore, leaders need to shift their mindsets. Leaders need to shift their mindsets from today to tomorrow, because that's what we are faced with at the moment. You have to shift from what you are presently in onto tomorrow. With that, and when you have that shift, it involves several changes that have important implication on the path to recovery. So we're going to look at this table, and then we continue the slides. The next one there is the focus. The focus of leadership is very important. It's expand from a very inward focus, which is the inward looking on member safety, to the operational focus. It moves, and it creates for us to return to the market facing period. That's why the implication there is they articulate the destination as stakeholders' outcomes. So for us, the focus is very, very important. Leaders should envisage that the destination in terms of desired stakeholders' outcomes, are not the internal processes. Leaders should be able to envisage that. The next one there is the management shift, the management goal shift. It's going to shift from the managing the crisis, which is the crisis management there, and then it will shift to the program management, where we keep the organization functioning so that we'll be able to manage the transition back to a restored future. So there we have to keep the organization functioning. So it is very important when it comes to this phase, because that's where we have the management shift, which is very important for the management of the association. It keeps the organization functioning. Without that management mindset shift, the organization cannot continue to function. It's managed from a transition back to a restored future. And the implication there, that's why we need it, is because the recovery project period there, when we have the project management, we need a different skill set during this period. Sometimes you will have somebody with one skill set, but you don't want to discourage that person. You don't want to move away from that person. You don't want to move away from that person, but you want that person to feel as if she is part of the organization. And so you are going to help the person to use the skill sets that the person already have, the skill set that the member already have, and use it so that you'll be able to be effective and be able to restore the organization back to the future. You don't want to say, well, we don't need your skill sets at this moment, so we're going to find somebody with another skill set. No, we don't want to do that at this point in time. We're going to use the skill set that we have if we don't have the required skill set for that particular office. The next one there is the planning shift. So it's from a short-term planning to a mid or long-term planning. It's a scenario, we have the planning, they have the contingency planning and the scenario planning. So you move here from the planning to the contingency planning, which is a short-term or a long-term, and then you move to the scenario planning. So that we'll be able to understand the related impact on operations. We'll be able to understand the related impact on our members. We'll be able to understand the related impact on our finances. They're very important. We'll be able to understand the related impact on our programs. Why do we want to do that? It's because it is critical to model the alignment of the financial resources to the cash required, so that we'll be able to revamp the organization again. We'll be able to revamp the operations in the organization. Because if you don't have that model to be able to align the financial resources to the cash required, you're going to be short of funding, you're going to be short of funds. So they're very much important. The model to align the financial resources to vamp up the operations of the organization is important. And then we move on to attitude. The leadership attitude shifts from a reacting and then to a reinventing. From a primary reactive model to anticipate how to reinvent the organization. How do we want to reinvent this MO that we are presently in this crisis situation. Remember, when the crisis occurs, we are reacting. But now we want to reinvent. We have reacted. Our attitude, we want to use those attitudes to reinvent the organization. Why do we want to do that? Because leaders should seize the opportunity to energize their teams, to make their teams motivated by imagining a successful future. We don't want the team to be discouraged. We don't want the team to be disappointed. We have to embrace the trust. The members have to embrace the trust in the leaders and say they'll help us to make our future good. They'll help us to make our future successful. So the attitude there is very important. We are now moving from a reacting attitude to a reinventing attitude. We have reacted, but how are we going to live our MO? How are we going to organize our MO? How are we going to make it successful so that members will believe in us, the members will trust in us, they will have confidence in the leadership that they have. Next slide, please. Next slide. So we're going to look at trust. Trust in an association is so much important for a leader. Without trust, the membership will not have confidence in you. They will not have confidence in their leadership. So it is necessary that trust is built during crisis period. They need to know that trust among us can help us to recover quickly. Trust is human. Depends on how you approach a situation, that will determine the trust level of your membership. You know, as leaders in MOs, we need to understand that recovery is a human experience. So we have to shift the mindset from recovery, to recovery period. We have to move our mindset now from the response period to the recovery period. So we need to understand that the 4 human dimensions of trust are the physical, the emotional, the digital, and the financial. The physical, the emotional, the digital, and the financial. So the physical, trust that your physical space is safe. Our members need to have confidence, trust in the leadership, in the MO, that they are safe, their space is safe. Emotional, they have to have trust that your emotional and societal needs are being safeguarded. That is, if we're having a virtual program, a virtual meeting, what are the things that we need to do to safeguard our girls? You know, when you're connected to the internet, there are a lot of things, distraction that comes up. So we need to create that trust level from among our membership, among the girls, so that they know that in as much as they are connected, but they are safe, they are respected, they are safeguarded. Financial, trust that our financial concerns are being served. During crisis period, finances is not business as usual. Finances for some people will be limited. Finances for some MO will decrease. MOs are affected financially during a crisis period. But how will you encourage the membership to believe in you during this period as you manage the finances of the organization? What is it that you want to involve the finances with? What is it that you want to do with finances in the organization? One that can respond quickly to the needs of girls during the period, the crisis period. And then digital, we trust that your information is secure. Members need to have confidence in whatever data and whatever information they supply the MO with. They have confidence. Stakeholders need to have that confidence. So if the stakeholders, they sponsored us into doing an activity, they have to have trust and confidence that these finances will be taken care of by this activity. This activity will be taken care of by these finances. And proper reporting, proper accountability, that makes for trust. Reporting, monitoring, and evaluation is very important so that members can have trust and confidence in the leadership of the MO. The way we handle the situation during crisis. Some people think that during crisis period, there are no accountabilities. But during crisis period, you need to be accountable. And because that builds trust among our members. Can we move on to the next slide? Next slide. Okay. Here we have our recovery roadmap, and we have the outcome, the description, and the core strategic questions that MO will need to ask. During the recover and grow period, we have to recapture funding opportunities. If we don't have funding opportunities, how are we going to grow financially? If we don't have funding opportunities, how can we grow with the activities that we have with the girls? Without funding, you cannot implement the activities. So we need to use them and implement them for growth. And therefore, we have the question that we need to ask. Should the MO engage girls and adults for acquisition and maintenance? You will have to answer that. You will have to answer that. Should the MO engage girls? What behavior changes are likely to be permanent in the members? That should be answered. Because you're moving from one shift to the other, to today, from today to tomorrow. We have to be very, very careful as we look at recovery and growth. The next one is the increased margin, our investment adjustments. What do we want to invest in? What investment can, bring increase? Should we manage the MO for resilience or for increase? We have to answer that question. Should we manage our MOs for resilience or for increase? Then we accelerate digital transformation. We've seen that we moved. We moved digital capabilities to enable our growth. We moved, but we want to use them at a decreased cost. And so that we progress, in our MO. We use equipment that we can use they are cost effective. We use facilities that are cost effective, but at the same time that will enable us to grow. How can the MO move faster towards digital transformation? There are some MOs that are behind when it comes to digital transformation. So for us as MO, how can we move faster? What equipment can we put in place? What structures can we put in place? How can we transform so that we'll be able to incorporate the digital age, the digital transformation? It's very important. The support members and operating structures. The next one is support to members and operating structures. Align the activities, the membership and the MO, as well as the operating model. What type of operating model do we want to use? How are we going to align those activities to our membership? The activities and the membership, can they work in consonance? What methods are we going to use to deliver them? What plan are we going to use to implement those activities? So we need to ask ourselves, how has the social agreement with members and staff changed? Because if you are changing your activities, you are aligning model and activities, you are aligning model, you are aligning activities, you are aligning membership, as well as the MO. There are a lot of changes that are taking place, but how does the social agreement with members and staff changed? Remember, when you change, it's affecting people. When a lot of things change, they have effects on people. And so we need to take that into consideration and ask those questions. Do the MO have the right operating structures and alliances in place to deliver this plan that we want to implement now? If not, what do we need to do? Then we manage the expectation of members and other stakeholders. So in the description there, we say we manage and fulfill members' expectation at the same time proactively addressing the risk. When you are faced with a crisis situation, there are risks attached when you try to implement and develop any activity or program. But how do you address risk as well? So we ask ourselves, how have social and MO's expectations changed? We need to ask those questions, and those questions need to be answered. So when we're looking at the recovery roadmap, that's why MO have to come, the response team have to come clearly in line with the MO to be able to answer, to be able to communicate, to be able to discuss. So when they bring out all of these questions, they need to have feedback. They need to get responses from the membership, from the stakeholders, internal stakeholders and external stakeholders, so that we'll be able to implement our activities and our programs so that they will be good for the girls that we serve. Next slide. Next slide. What type of equipment can we use? What type of communication system can we use during our communication time? So we're using various mediums, such as the websites, the social media. We use the press, we use the bulletin, we use engagement, we use email. We use so many of them. I'm sure you can name some of them as well. Can we move on, please? Next slide. Okay, before we move on to the communication strategy, I'll need to ask a question so that people can answer. We have looked briefly at, how we can handle the crisis period. Are we being faced with crisis? Can we name some of the crises that we have encountered in our MO? Can we please? Can we name some of the crises that we have encountered in our MO? I would like members to respond. Okay, somebody just said that they've not been able to meet face to face. That's a crisis field that need a plan, a contingency plan. Yes, what else? We've not been able to generate funds. What other crisis can we?
Not being able to have outdoor activities.
All girls don't, yes, come again, please.
Not being able to have outdoor activities.
Yeah, we've not been able to have outdoor activities. Do we have more that we can share?
All girls don't have internet to participate.
Girls don't have internet to participate. Maybe we can, loss of a member, yeah. I was just going to say that when I saw it. If we lose a member by death, maybe a very senior member, that's a crisis for you.
We have a note from Gabriella that says we cannot increase membership.
Yeah, we cannot increase membership.
From Pamela, we don't have sufficient volunteers to do all of the communication tasks.
That's correct. That's true. Maybe fire. It's a crisis. If we have a fire in our headquarters, that's a crisis for you. Even a natural disaster, like in America, we have this fire that was burning. That's a crisis for you. I'm sure if we have MO in that region, they will not be able to have their normal activities. Maybe a ban, the government's legislation banning activities like they did for COVID, they banned all activities. That's a crisis for you. Okay. So far, we are competing with schools. I was unable to read that one. Can you read it? The one that says we are competing with schools.
Competing with schools which have all online classes all day.
Ah, yes, yes, exactly. That is correct.
And then another note written in Spanish that we cannot use our own facilities for
We cannot use our facilities. Yeah, we cannot use our facilities. For us, even in our association, it was like very difficult. You know, for us, we are in a deep crisis period because not all of our girls have internet facility. They don't have, some don't even have a cell phone that they can connect online with. And so it makes it very, very difficult for us. It makes it so challenging. So we have to create a way. We have to devise a way to be able to reach the girls, which makes them very difficult. And sometimes some of these girls, we are unable to reach them. Okay, let's move on. We're going to move on. Okay, now we are looking at the communication strategy. Why is a communication strategy important? So we're going to look at a communication strategy. So how do we want to communicate? What strategy are we going to use to communicate? So reassure members that there is an effective plan in place to deal with the situation. That is why a communication strategy is important. To reassure members that there is an effective plan in place to deal with the situation. So the communication strategy is very important because of that reason. Because if we don't have a strategy that we will use to reassure members, they will think that there is turmoil in the association. They will think that we are disorganized. and it will create more chaos. The next one is to help minimize damage to the operations and reputation of the MO. The communication plan salvage damages. If we don't have a communication strategy, we'll create a lot of rumor around, damaging rumor for our association. You know, the gossips. If you don't communicate, then we'll create room for gossip. We'll create rooms for people to talk things that they are not aware of, things that they are not au fait with. And when you examine them carefully, you'll know that they are not true. So we need a communication strategy. And then to retain loyalty of members. We need our members to believe that we respect them. We need our members to believe that they are valuable. We need our members to know that they are our loyal members. And so we need to retain that. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, an effective communication involves, we outline the problem that the MO is currently facing with, the situation that we are currently in. There are different types of crises, so we need to outline them. We need to make sure that we have it clearly spelled out so that people understand the types of crises we are currently in. How the MO intend to solve it, how they intend to solve the crisis problem, what strategy they are going to use, what method they are going to use, what are they going to put in place to solve it, what are they going to do to maintain. So it's important that we have our plan incorporate all of these things. The element that should be avoided, we need to take note of them as we develop our communication strategy. We identify a responsible member as a voice for the MO. We don't allow everybody to speak. We don't allow everybody to be our PR. We don't allow everybody to be the voice of the MO. We have to have somebody responsible, somebody that people can listen to and respect and understand clearly what the person is saying. And when that person speaks, it's the MO that have spoken. And then internal communication, which must be coherent and consistent. We don't bring out a communication this week and then we leave next week and then after 1 month. No, it has to be consistent. It has to be clear. It has to be effective. Those communications that we make internally with our MO, with the girls, with our volunteers, with our staff, with the board members. The communication needs to be clear and they need to be consistent. They need to be regular. They need to be up to date. We don't want to communicate obsolete things that are not effective, that we'll not be able to use during this crisis period. Next slide. So as we say, how can this happen when we look at the communication strategy? How? Remember we said the response team. So we're going to establish a crisis communication team. A crisis responsible members in the association. People that cannot compromise the mission and vision of the association. People that cannot compromise the objectives of the activities that we want to implement. We bring the crisis communication team together. And then we select the voice, as I said previously, a spokesperson for the communication team. It's not everybody in the communication team that will be talking. We have to have one person that will stand and represent the team on behalf of the association. We consider the potential risk the MO might encounter during this period. There are a lot of risks MO encounter when it comes to crisis period. So we have to consider that. And then we develop a crisis communication plan. We'll have to look at a crisis communication plan in a moment as we go through the slides. And then we keep clear communication lines. Who communicates to who? When do we communicate to each other? When do we communicate to stakeholders? When do we communicate to members? When do we communicate to our representatives? When do we communicate to our adult leaders? When do we communicate to our volunteers? When do we communicate to our board members? Or when do we communicate to the government? We don't want a messy communication strategy. We will just go through this quickly because they are just straightforward. When we look at the communication strategy, we need to always consider the nature of the crisis and the cause of the crisis. What type of crisis are we in? And what caused this crisis? What are the causes responsible for this crisis? What are the causes responsible for these present circumstances? And the scope of the crisis, the impact it has on the organization. Is it possible that we will continue as a MO? Is it possible that we'll continue as an association? Our members affected? Are the girls affected? How long is the crisis going to take? What will be the likely response of the girls and the adults? We need to seek their feedback. That's why when we communicate, we need to listen to their feedback. It's a two-way. They'll bring out the communication clearly about the crisis, and then we need people to respond. We need people to feedback us. How will the crisis be solved? The methods, the strategy. What path do we want to take? How do we want to go about it? Who will be informed, when and how? When do we want to inform the girls? How do we want to inform them? How, when do we want to inform them? The stakeholders, the people that we work with, the volunteers, other organizations. When will we inform them? Who will be responsible for communication? The spokesperson. The voice of the organization will be responsible for communication. Not everyone. The type of communication channels that we want to use. We want to use a bulletin. We want to use the website. We want to use a Facebook. We want to use the WhatsApp. What site do we want to use? We want to use internet or intranet. We identify what needs to be communicated. That's why we have to have a responsible spokesperson. We don't want to have somebody that is irresponsible, somebody that is immature, and then communicate things that should not be communicated. And then we need to have a continuation of the communication plan, even after the crisis. We need to have a continuation of the communication plan, even after the crisis. Next slide. So now I was asked to look at the contingency plan. We say a contingency plan is a proactive strategy. A contingency plan is a proactive strategy. It is not reactive. It is a proactive thing. It's different from other plans. And so when we have this crisis, we need to have a plan B, which is usually the contingency plan that can help us to manage the crisis. The contingency plan is a set of accounts for those disruptive events. It helps us to take account of those disruptive events. The contingency plan helps us to manage those events that are unexpected. So when they come, we are prepared for them. That's why we have a plan B. It is usually called a plan B, and it is also referred to as a contingency plan. Next slide. Here we are going to look at the contingency plan itself. We're going to look at the contingency plan itself. We say a formal contingency plan makes up of critical information an organization need to continue operation during an unplanned event. So you need to consider the critical information that we as an organization, that you as an MO, you will need to continue operations. Because maybe they will not be handy and you are faced with a crisis. You have your contingency plan already. So those critical information should be part of your contingency plan. Think through possible problems that might arise before they occur. That's a formal contingency plan. We identify which system and process must be sustained and how to maintain them. How are we going to maintain our contingency plan? So in this plan, we are going to look at what it covers. It covers the scenario, it covers the triggers, the response, who to inform, key responsibilities, and timeline. So the scenario refers to your risk assessment. The scenario refers to the impact, the probability chart. And that's where we choose the damaging or most likely scenarios that we want to plan for. We outline them. We look at those difficult scenarios, those difficult situations. We choose them and we do a contingency plan for them. The next one is the triggers. The triggers, these are the causes. They are the activators. You know, they specify what will cause you to put your contingency plan into action. They'll tell you, this is time to put your contingency plan into action. If you have a plan for heavy snow, as you might have in some of your country, it will be triggered by a severe weather warming. It will be triggered by a severe weather warming so that you'll be able to make a plan that could take care of the heavy snow. So one event could also be, one event can have multiple triggers. One crisis event can have different type of triggers. And when you look at your crisis team, they will help you to identify those triggers. And one thing that we need to know, each triggers will have a different plan. Each trigger will have a different plan. Then we have the response. What type of response strategies will we follow in response to the events, in response to the crisis? What type of response strategy are we going to follow as we respond to the crisis? This provides a context for the action that you ask your members to take. So what type of response strategies, what type of response mechanism during this period? The next one is who to inform. Identify the people who need to know about what has happened. We need to identify the people that need to know about what has happened. The girls, the board members, our volunteers, they need to know. They need to be informed. They should not be taken by surprise. They need to hear from the people that need to communicate to them. Also the public, sometimes the government. It depends on the type of crisis that we have. Sometimes relevant authorities need to be informed. Our key responsibilities. Define who is responsible for each element of the plan. This aspect of the plan, who is responsible? Each plan has to have a responsible person who will be in charge of each plan at each stage. When we go to this stage, who will be in charge? When we go to the implementation stage, who will be in charge? We need to identify responsible people. And what you expect them to accomplish, they need to be aware. It's like you're setting an objective. So if you identify that you are in charge of this, they need to know what is expected of them. And then the next one, you set timeline. Timeline. State what needs to be done. At what time? The first hour, the first day, the first week? What actions need to be done during those periods? What activities need to take place during the first hour, during the first day, during the first week? Even as we implement those plans, we need to take consideration of every timeline, and every timeline is important. You will not do the activities that you have to do as you implement your plan. The ones that you need to do at the end for 1 month, you bring it on the first day. You create chaos in the plan. You know, this could be simple as inform leaders and members of the situation immediately. So the first hour, you need to inform your leaders. You need to inform members. You need to inform them. But also, there are times when you need far more longer timeline. When you are looking at data, you are looking at serious problems, you are looking at serious crises, there are more in-depth timeline. Maybe you have to plan for a longer period. So it depends on the type of crisis. That's how you do your planning for your timeline. Also, in the timeline, you need to consider, when are we going to resume? When are we going to go back to normalcy? So it's very important. In the timeline, it should be stated and it should be clear. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, here we are going to develop the contingency plan. So what we need to do, involve members and staff and management. Why do we want to involve them? Because they are also in charge of something. They have accountabilities as well. So they have to add input into our plans. They need to bring suggestions into our plans. They need to give us advice as we develop our plans. They need to be aware. When people are involved in an activity, they own it. And so that's why we want to involve our members. We want to involve the staff. We want to involve the management in the plan. We cannot do a plan and bring it and say, look at the plan, accept it. But when they are involved in the plan, they take ownership of the plan. The next one, we need to seek support. Seek the support of people around you. Seek the support of your leaders. Seek the support of the members. Seek the support of people with different skill sets. People that have various skill sets, depending on the type of activities you are involved in when you're doing the contingency plan. And then you make it simple. We don't want to make an elaborate plan that is unrealistic. We make it simple so that everybody can understand. Everybody will know what the plan entails and be able to understand it. Somebody can read it and be able to understand the plan. So that's why we want to keep a simple plan. We don't want to make it too, elaborate, and then we cannot handle it at the end of the day because there are a lot of misunderstandings and chaos. And then we want to maintain the plan. How do we maintain the plan? We review and update it regularly. If you don't, then you'll have an obsolete plan. We want our plan to remain useful and credible so that it's alive, it's active. So you update it regularly, even when there's no crisis. That's time you prepare for crisis. And then you take all relevant technological, operational, and personnel changes into account and assess the risk accordingly. That's why you have to familiarize yourself with the organizational structure. So when you do the plan, it's advisable to put the position instead of the name. So if there's a change, it's effected in the plan. So when you put the position, you have the position continuing. They know that this position is responsible for this activity. Familiarize new member with the plan. If you have a new member, the new member have to be au fait with the plan, so that if there is a crisis, the new member will know the course of action to take. So we have to familiarize the new member with our plan so that they know what will happen and what action they should take when there is a problem. And then we keep our plan backed up. You have to have a digital version of your plan. You can keep it somewhere so that the plan is readily available at any time. We don't want to keep a plan in one place and then the crisis, if we have a tsunami and we cannot access the plan. So if you back it up somewhere, you'll be able to have a digital version of your plan. Next slide. Next slide. Whatever we do as an association, as an MO, we say effective and honest communication is the key to building trust. If we communicate clearly, then you have the girls, the members, the stakeholders, they will have trust in the leadership of the MO. So because we want to build trust, we are going to have a very vibrant communication team, a very vibrant response team, because we want to build trust in our members. So, are we in alignment? Sure, we have to. We need to be in alignment because we are in this together. We are all in this together. No one person can arrange a crisis plan. No one person. Next slide. So we looked at the 5 steps before. We said, we gather the response team, we review and update the data, we prioritize the challenges and the response, we plan options for recovery, and we act promptly and communicate effectively. Is that the last slide? One thing that we'll never forget is our promise to our girls. We don't forget that whatever we do for the girls that we serve. So whatever you do during the crisis period, be reminded that you are there to support the girls. You are there to support the girls.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. That was a very detailed presentation. I'm sure that we took away a lot from all that you have said over the past hour and a half. So as a reminder, when an unanticipated crisis arises, we should not freeze, but we need to think about continuity. And while we're thinking about continuity, we need to remember that throughout all phases towards recovery and reinvention, planning and communication are key. So if you forget about anything, just remember those 2 things. You need to plan and you need to communicate so as to ensure that everyone is on board and that you are moving strategically and you're not just doing a temporary response. So at this time, we will open the floor for questions to be asked. We did receive 2 questions via the form. So if those 2 persons who would have shared questions previously would like to ask those questions directly, we'd appreciate that. Stephanie, could you assist in sharing the questions?
I can assist. And if this is your question, please let us know. I will read it in English. When you make the COVID crisis strategy, do you consult with your group of girls? Or does only the crisis committee make the decision? And if that is your question, please feel free to let us know and let us know if you'd like to add anything else to that. I'll read that one more time. Ms. Johnson, in case you'd like to respond.
Yes, please read out the question. I thought you were talking to the question. Yes,
sure.
Please.
The question is, when you make the COVID crisis strategy, do you consult with your group of girls, or does just the crisis committee make the decision?
It depends on the type of crisis that you're faced with. There are crises. That's why we said when we're bringing the team, the response team, we have to have strong people in the response team. We have to have decision makers in the response team, people that can make decisions on our behalf. So we don't need to have people that we go back and forth with questions and answers from a chief commissioner or from a board member. So in that case, there are crises that the response team can make decisions on our behalf. And then the response team can feedback us, can come back to us, to the girls. The response team can share with the girls. Is that clear?
Thank you for that response. And again, if you submitted that question, please feel free to indicate that in the chat, and our host, Sadia, can call on you and you can expand if you wish. The second question I will read. I'm going to try to read it in Spanish, so excuse me for any mispronunciations. I'll repeat it in English after I read it in Spanish for you, Ms. Johnson.
Okay.
¿Existen o contamos con protocolos o políticas de protección a las niñas, tanto en actividades físicas como virtuales? ¿Y cuál es la estrategia de respuesta ante una emergencia y la recuperación? The question in English is, do we have any existing protocols or policies for girls' protection for both virtual activities and physical activities? And also, what is the response strategy before the emergency and the recovery from the emergency?
Can you go over that question? I see there are many parts to that question.
Yes, I'll read the first portion. Again, just in English now. Is there an existing protocol or any policies to protect girls for virtual and physical activities?
Yes, of course. If you go to the WAC's website, there are protocols that are existing that can protect girls, and safeguard them from virtual activities. WACs have protocols that are existing in the WAC's website.
Okay, thank you.
So when I say WACs, I mean the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts.
Thank you. And specifically, the WAG safeguarding policy is a good document for all member organizations to access and review. So in the follow-up to this webinar, when we send the recording, we'd be happy to include those links to the pages of our website. Thank you. And let me read the second part of this question again.
Mm-hmm.
What is the response strategy before an emergency and also after the emergency, the recovery from the emergency?
What is the response strategy before the emergency?
Yes, and also after the emergency.
I think I explained what we can involve in our strategies that we use. So if you have an emergency, it depends on the type of MO that you have. It depends on the type of structure that you have. It depends on the type of leadership that you have. That's how you will respond to it. So all MOs will have different way of responding to different emergencies.
Thank you. And again, we will share the slide deck and a recording of this presentation with all attendees. So if you'd like to review anything that Ms. Johnson has shared with us in more detail, you can. So maybe I'll turn it back over to Sadia because we do not have any other questions in the forum at this time.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Ms. Johnson. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question directly at this time? You are able to unmute and ask your question. Okay, I haven't seen anyone signal. So with that, we have come to the end of today's presentation. Just as a reminder, you can look forward in upcoming weeks for webinars, which will focus on recruitment and retention, strategic partnership, and fund development.